And so I went home and I just started packing my stuff. And it was funny because the women's church group was there at the house, pastor's wife, and all these people were there. And I just walked in, walked right past them, didn't say a word. She's like, "Where you been?" I didn't say a word. I just walked right on by. Went to my room and grabbed a bag and started packing some stuff. And was on my way out the door, and I still didn't say a word. Went out the door and past her husband my uncle had come home from work. And he's like, "What are you doing?" So I asked him, I was like, explain to me about the inheritance deal and the money and all that. And he's like, "You're going to have to talk to her about that. I don't have anything to do with that." I'm like, "All right." So I walked back around to the back door, right there where they were having their meeting in the family room. Opened the back door. "Explain to me where all this money went." And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about, trying to play it off. And I was just like, "Fuck you." Slammed the door and walked out. So I went and lived with my sister for a while. And, wanted to continue going to school back in the town I was in. So I ended up moving in with some friends, some foster family friends, or some friends from school, but they raised foster kids. And so I moved in with them. And needless to say, they were religious as well, but more of the moderate style. So church was, different, then and everything. And, I started, because a little prior to this, I decided I wanted to be a missionary. And by the time I was 18, I had actually been ordained as a minister, a Baptist minister. And I wanted to be a missionary because missionaries would come to the church and, give their talks, and it was always fascinating. But now I'm in a moderate environment, and the theology is different. And so I'm asking them, well, wait a minute, we believe this, how come you guys believe it this way? And, and I would just have these, back and forths about all this stuff. And so it was, it just seemed like it depended on who I asked, I would get a different answer. Things weren't as cut and dried as they had always seemed. And so I started reading a lot, checking out, different authors, and really digging into it. And looking at, the other religions that I was supposed to be able to use these Christian apologetic arguments to debunk. But I could also, without any, I'd never read any, atheist material or anything like that. I didn't know anything about that. But I could debunk the Christian stuff just as easily as I could debunk, Islam or Hinduism. And I am looking at this, I'm like, something is just not right, And so I started going to around to other churches, I'd check out, Jehovah's Witnesses, or, the Methodists, and, Mormons, and all these different churches, and they all had different ideas of what the Bible said, and it was just so odd to me that finally I came to a point, it's like, I just don't know what I believe. And so I started, since the Bible was our authority, that was, where everything came from there. So I started checking out, well, who wrote the Bible? So it's kind of, like a Bart Ehrman story. I kind of started checking into all that, and come to find out, nobody knows who wrote the Bible. Moses didn't really write the, first 5 books of the Old Testament. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John didn't write Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I mean, the only ones they know who wrote anything was, they know some of the letters of Paul were actually written by Paul. Some of them were not. And the book of Revelation. They know whoever wrote Luke and Acts was the same guy, but they don't know who he was. They don't know if it was Luke. And so all this, stuff is, and it's not, like I said, there's never one big thing that turned me from Christian to atheist. It was just, over a period of years, all of these things just start adding up. And becoming an atheist, isn't something that you just do. It's not something a decision that you make. The best way I can describe it is, at what point does someone become an adult? And most people say, well, when someone's 18, they're an adult. It's like looking at that person as an 18-year-old at midnight on their birthday. Now they're an adult. But are they really any more of an adult than they were 10 minutes prior to their birthday? They were 17 10 minutes ago. and they're no less of an adult than they are 10 minutes later when they're 18. And it's not something that happens. It's just, and so people don't really become an adult at 18. It's just, they mature, and as time goes by, you need to look back and say, well, this is probably about the time somebody became an adult. So, and that's what it's like going from, religion to non-belief. It's just something that happens over a period of time, and it's not an event that says, okay, boom, I stopped believing in God. It's not like that at all. And pretty soon I just got to the point where I just didn't know what to believe at all. So I was like, when I moved out from that family, I got an apartment on my own. And I was still in high school, and I worked third shift. I would go to work at night and come home in the morning and get ready for school and go to school. And I was putting myself through high school, like most people put themselves through college. And I was called to the office one day, and they said, look, it's come to our attention that you don't have a guardian. And, you could abuse the system and, write yourself notes, excuse yourself from school and things like that, so we're going to have to suspend you from school. I was like, okay, so they suspended me from school for 10 days for not having any parents. And so I didn't know what to do, so I just went home and went to work and come home and go to work. Well, so about a couple weeks later, the counselor from school comes and knocks on my door. And they're like, hey, we was wondering if you was going to come back to school, your suspension's over. I was like, I haven't gotten any new parents in the last 2 weeks. I mean, what am I supposed to do? And they were like, I really don't know. And so that's the way it was. So I never ended up going back to high school. So I floated around for a couple of years and ended up joining the military. I wanted to see the world and do a lot of things. So joined the Army. And it was after I joined the military that, I started having run-ins again with, Christians or Muslims or, people from other, different forms of Christianity, Catholics and, Pentecostals, you name it, you run into all of them. And being in this melting pot of, all these different religions and stuff, and continuing reading and things like that, pretty soon, somebody eventually asked me, if asked me to go to church with them or something. And I can't even remember the exact conversation, but basically it came out that, no, I'm not going to go to church just because I just don't believe any of that stuff anymore. And, as the conversation went on, he was like, no, I really don't believe there's a God. I don't see any, evidence or, any reason to even believe that one exists in the first place. I mean, for the first 5 years of my life, I had never heard of Jesus or God, and everything was, okay, and now, then all of a sudden it was, this really fire and brimstone Christian environment, and now I'm on my own, and things are okay again. And, and like the whole time growing up and, feeling like I was just this little slave kid, I was praying at night. I would sit up at night and cry in my room. Because I had a bedroom down in the basement, dark and scary down there. And I would just cry and, and I would pray, Jesus, please help me, do something, And nothing ever happened. And it's not, and it wasn't that I was, insincere or anything like that. And the feeling of being alone, even though you want, desperately for there to be somebody else there, you can't even describe that. And when I ended up leaving, it was like a feeling of reaching down and picking myself up by the bootstraps. And, and I thought, and years later, I would think back on that, and it was like, nothing ever happened or changed or got better until I got up and did it myself.